Several years ago, I had a recurring dream about burning alive in a hotel. It was so realistic. I could feel the pain and hear screams. Each dream would be more and more detailed than the last dream. I could make out the exact details of the building. When we went on vacation, we stopped in a small city and looked for a hotel, and we stopped at the exact hotel in my dream. I just froze and repeatedly asked if we could go to a different hotel. After pestering my parents about it, we went somewhere else. It burned down that night. We were supposed to stay there and killed 14 people. My brother's bedroom was next door to mine growing up. One afternoon, he asked me what I was doing the previous night that made me laugh so much. Confused, I pressed him for details. About 3 in the morning last night, your laughter woke me up. It sounded like you were pacing your room too, pacing and laughing. At this point, I told him that I wasn't home last night. I'd been at a friend's house. He went pale. To this day, he swears blind that it was my laugh. I have a very distinct laugh, apparently. Camping at a friend's family property with a group of friends. They had a huge dingy shop full of old tools and furniture that was super creepy. Dirt floor and clown paintings in the loft. Not even kidding. We stayed up late drinking by the fire, and I was the last one awake. Went to go pee on the side of the shop and stood about 5 feet away looking inside through the window. There was a fluorescent light on, and I noticed what looked like a piece of paper or dollar kind of floating around. I thought it was a moth at first, but it was moving in a very flowing figure-8 pattern that was very rhythmic. It reminded me of dangling a carrot. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds, which felt like forever. Then it quickly floated back to the corner of the shop where it was dark. There was also a wood chair near the corner that added to the creepiness. Could have been a moth though. I sat back down by the fire to finish my beer and have a smoke. No one else was awake, so I played on my phone for a while. I noticed my friend Mark pop out of his tent to pee, then go back in to go to sleep. I decided sleep sounded good, so I went to my tent and fell asleep. The next morning, we were having breakfast and Mark said, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late. How late did you stay up?" I told him probably 2 or 3 in the morning. Then he said, "Who was up with you?" I told him I was the last man standing. He said, "I got up to pee and saw you on your phone and 2 people over your shoulder watching you play." He said one person looked bigger, so he thought it was one of our friends, who was a bigger dude. He said the other person was taller and skinny, but none of us are noticeably tall or skinny. It freaked me out. We still camp at that property once a year, but I don't go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she's tired. The house I grew up in was haunted. The way it was laid out, I could see from my bedroom down the hall and into the living room. My parents' bedroom door was on the other side of the living room directly across from my door. Late at night, I would hear someone pacing circles in the living room, but I was the only one awake in the house, and we didn't have pets. I never said anything because I didn't want the family to think I was nuts. Eventually, I moved out and went to college. After I graduated, I was in a rough spot financially. My parents had bought a new house. The old one was still empty. They were considering getting renters and offered it to me to stay in for a while. I said no. I didn't want to move in. Mom asked why. I finally gave in and told her I thought there was a ghost. My mom froze and turned to look at me and was like, "You hear her too?" Turns out she had also heard it for years and didn't say anything for the same reason. I used to work night shift in group homes for the mentally disabled or severely mentally ill. At one house I worked at, there was constant scratching coming from the walls. I figured it was just squirrels, but now I'm not too sure. We had set a lot of traps and never caught anything. But this isn't what made me a believer. What happened was one night, I was watching TV in the living room after all the residents had fallen asleep. Around 3 in the morning, the doorbell starts ringing like someone is frantically pushing it. I get up and go to the door, but when I got there and opened it, nobody was there. Now the 3 things you need to know about the entryway. First is that the entry is into the living room, and I can see it from the couch. Second is that the front door has a very large window on it. 2/3 of the door is a window. And lastly, that the walkway to the front doorknob, a 20 to 30 foot corridor that has 12 feet brick wall on either side. So in order to ding dong ditch, you'd have to run back that entire length to be able to duck around a corner. I figured I was being pranked by one of our more mischievous residents, so I went and checked on them all, and they were all fast asleep. As soon as I finished shutting the last resident's door, the doorbell started frantically ringing again. I rushed to the door again, only to find nobody there. This time I was determined to catch them, so I turned all the lights off except the TV and hid right beside the door, so I'd be able to immediately open it when they came back. After 20 minutes, the doorbell started going insane again. I jumped out and quickly turned on the walkway lights and looked out the window, but nobody was there. I then opened the door thinking maybe they were hiding to the side of the door like I had. After seeing nobody there, my stomach dropped and I got a feeling of dread. I slowly started closing the door. As soon as the door was almost closed all the way, the doorbell started going nuts again and stayed that way for at least 15 minutes before stopping again. It was almost as if whatever it was took great pleasure in mocking and taunting me. I locked the door and ran to the couch after turning on all the lights I could. Another disturbing thing about this is it seemed to read my mind. Whenever I got the urge to go outside and smoke, it would start with the doorbell again. It's like it didn't want me to forget it's there and a threat. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was a poltergeist. That place was rife with bad energy, as most group homes are. A lot of suffering and raw emotions happen at those places. It also didn't help that we had a resident there who had literally gone insane after watching his parents get murdered in front of him, and a medium-low functioning schizophrenic with what I've confirmed of at least 8 distinct people talking to him in his head. Both of these residents are constantly having stuff knocked off their shelves and walls in the middle of the night, and it's super common for them to be yelling at people that aren't there to shut up in the middle of the night. I used to think it was just mental illness, but now I'm not too sure. A few years back, some friends and I were driving on some back roads in a patch of woods believed to be haunted. One of my friends was getting bored, so he rolled down his window and shouted, "Make something happen," or something along those lines. About 5 seconds after he rolls up the window, there is a strong, seemingly too well-timed knock on the window closest to me. We've seen some weird stuff in those woods, but nothing that couldn't be explained by shadows or animals. There is no explanation for that knock. Nothing was thrown at the car, we weren't moving. It sounded the way a knock made by a human hand sounds, etc. Later on, we heard a very feminine shriek in those woods with no explanation. When I was like 14, I was with a friend riding mountain bikes way out in the woods. We decided to turn back and go home for the day. We must have been 2 miles from any houses. Walking up the hill we just rode down was this old guy with minor clothes from the 1800s carrying a bucket. He was walking up the hill with his back towards us. He was only for a few seconds, and then he disappeared. We were both silent when I said, "I thought I saw something." He goes, "Yeah, me too." He perfectly described the guy. We got out of there very quick. This was in northern Arizona where they used to gold mine. There was even this old miner's cabin about a mile from us. I had just started a new job. The building I worked in was really old, definitely pre-war. I had to stay a bit later than I normally would to get something done, and by the time I was packing up to leave, my floor was pretty empty. I needed to use the restroom before I left, so I walked over there, and as I approached the door, I saw someone else open the door and go in. I remember vividly that they were wearing a pink shirt and khakis, because that's what I was wearing too. I was also mildly annoyed, because I don't like being in the bathroom when someone else is in there. After deciding I still definitely needed to pee before the commute home, I entered the bathroom. But when I got in, it was completely empty. I don't know how to describe the energy in the room, but it was very tense, completely silent. I remember being able to hear my heartbeat. After standing completely frozen for what felt like 10 minutes, it was probably like 15 seconds, I turned right around and left. I had nightmares about that bathroom for weeks. It seems so simple and uninteresting compared to a lot of other people's stories here, but it really shook me. There was something definitely off about the whole thing. When I was 6, I saw an older man holding hands with a little girl in my kitchen. We stared at each other for what felt like 5 minutes, and then they disappeared. Small but weird. I rented a room in a New England farmhouse, grad school. First night, about 2 in the morning, I had a very, very clear feeling I was being checked out by some sort of house spirits, but they approved. I went back to sleep. The first time my girlfriend came over, she sat up in bed. I asked what's up, and it was almost word for word. Something was checking her out, but there was no threat. A few weeks later, my brother came over, next morning. Unprompted, as he came downstairs, he said he felt like something was checking him out at night, but it was okay. A new housemate later said the same thing his first morning. None of them knew each other. It was weird. When my middle child was about 2 or 3, we lived in an old house with a lot of poorly built, self-done renovations. There was an under-the-house storage area accessible from one of the bedrooms. This workshop has a hatch door to the dirt under the house. Anyway, my daughter used to complain about the blue lady that lives under the house. We moved and never heard about it again. In 2012, my grandmother suffered a major stroke resulting in hospice in her home with her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren by her side. Friends and family were able to come by freely and spend time with her. I was very close to my grandma and was lucky to be able to share much of this time with her. For anyone that has ever been through hospice with a loved one, you will understand how hard this type of thing can be. One night, I was sitting at home in my office catching up on some work, when all of a sudden the room filled with the scent of perfume. I'm not talking about a faint smell. I'm saying it was very distinctive and strong throughout the entire room. I stopped everything I was doing and said out loud to myself, "Something is wrong. That is Graham." I had not spoken to my family that day, but felt an urgent need to send a text message to my uncle, whom was staying with her, to ask, "You guys okay?" This was at 11:20 p.m. I got a response right away saying, "Might want to come say goodbye. Not okay." I quickly rushed over. Upon arrival, The living room where my family was congregated was very silent and filled with blank faces. Without saying anything, I walked straight to my grandmother and kissed her on the forehead, saying I love her. She was still warm, but no longer breathing. I told my uncle that I was there because Grandma had brought me there. I asked when she passed, and he replied saying 5 minutes before I sent my text. This puts the perfume in my office at nearly the exact same moment. Now I'm going to say that I was born into an Irish Catholic family, but I am in no way a religious person. I would have been the first person to discount this type of story if you told it to me. But I must say, this experience had me thinking that there really is something more out there. I felt it. First and foremost, thank you for listening and for your continued support on the channel. It is so deeply appreciated, and I greatly enjoy connecting with every one of you. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more unnerving tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Share this video with your friends and comment below. Which of these eerie tales gave you the creeps and chills? I would love to hear your thoughts.